The original version of this video was uploaded to Jason Verney's YouTube channel, where it and many other videos, podcasts, snippets and films can be found. That channel can be found at youtube.com/Jason Verney. This is the Not So Korean podcast with Jay and Tim. I am Jason Verney.
And this is Timothy Holm.
In this podcast series, we talk to one another and sometimes with special guests about what we know about Korea,
What we don't know about Korea,
what we want to know about Korea,
and occasionally what we don't want to know about Korea.
As you probably know, and as we always say, we usually record this live in UK's Koreatown itself. That's an area in and around New Malden. Yes, that's the largest Koreatown and Korean community in Europe. But I must add a quick statement from me, Jay, before passing you over to myself, on the fly and on the move, somewhere else. Due to the nature of this episode, some segments, and in particular the sound quality, will differ slightly. Hopefully this won't affect your listening pleasure though. Enjoy! Hi there, it's Jay. I have a lot to speak about in this episode. I'm going to announce a special guest who will be in the next episode. I'm going to talk about myself meeting Tim, so co-hosts back together. Also a recent an event in Trafalgar Square, and there's a chance to go to Koreatown or New Malden and meet myself and Tim. Let's start this off with a little mention of the guest, and I'll kind of lead on to who that is later on. But if you've seen our social media, our NoSoKoPo or Not So Korean podcast, since social media, we've got Instagram, we've got a Facebook account, we've also got a group on Facebook, so there's a little community there. We're also recently started up on Twitter, which is under NoSoKoPo. I recently put out there wouldn't be an episode last week. The reason for that is that I've been really up against it with other stuff. I've only been, as I record this right now, I've actually been in the UK less than 2 weeks, and even in that time managed to get an episode out. I even recorded half of that episode in an airport in Asia and half of it in the UK, so that was, something I managed to do. But I also felt like we've got a guest coming up in our episode. I was also going to meet Tim, and I did meet Tim, and more on that in a minute. And I felt like it needs to have a little break. So after 7 episodes in 2 months, I just felt it was time to have a little breather. So as I sit here in my temporary recording space, bearing in mind as I say, I met Tim, and one thing that Tim did do, he was kind enough to collect a little bit of mail or post from my address that I was in New Malden, in Koreatown. And in front of me right now is a Christmas card from 2022, and it's from Philip Goman, so it's from London Korean Links. And I've been getting these Christmas cards for several years, and always a great design on them by Jiun Kim, a friend of ours, Kim Jiun, really good artist, and she's also known as the Drawing Hand. So of course it's a Christmas card. I've opened it, 5-6 months later, and I knew it was actually coming because I provided my address. But it was, in that post there was a nice sort of Korean related item. And talking of Korean related items, Tim is not a Korean related item per se. He has lived there, Timothy. But we met in Trafalgar Square. We met in Tunbridge Wells, a town in the UK, a town where I actually used to live. But not only that, although it's not got that much Koreanness, and I did touch on this in my last episode, or our last episode, there's a few things. In fact, I think one thing that happened when Tim arrived waiting for me, he wanted to go there anyway to this, to see. It's very picturesque parts of Tunbridge Wells, and it's also quite famous. It's also known as Royal Tunbridge Wells. But apparently, not long after he got off the train from Koreatown, from New Malden, he got the train or trains to Tunbridge Wells, and he spotted or met some Koreans sort of straight away. So because I've spoken in the last episode about, you know, some towns in the UK and many places in the UK don't have non-white or non-English people. That is changing though. You know, there are towns, you know, everywhere is probably becoming, I don't know what the word is, I want to use internationalized, less homogenized. But yeah, it was interesting that he told me when I arrived, he told me as I was on the way to meet him in Tunbridge Wells, because I'm staying not that far from there, so it seemed a great place for us to catch up. He told me that happened. And also later on we had some food, and we went for a pub lunch in the Pantiles, a very famous area of Tunbridge Wells. But we chose to have the burgers that they do there, or they get delivered there. And on the menu there was a Korean burger. I think it was called, I can check this now. Yes, it was called the Sewol burger. Quite original or unoriginal. No, the Sewol sandwich, I'm sorry. But there was also one on the menu called the Sewol sister. And that was a vegetarian option. Was it vegan or vegetarian? One of the two. I think vegetarian, because it's got halloumi. Just looking at the menu there. So that was interesting. So there was one or two things relating to Korea that, you know, that we picked up on when we were there, and we had a great catch up. We did think about recording an episode at this first time together, but we said let's save it. After all, we are going to meet in Koreatown, New Malden very soon, and that's when I mentioned about potentially meeting up with us. If any listeners want to, I'll come to that in a minute, or in a few minutes I'll come to that. So it was a great day we spent together. It was a little reunion, having, you know, lived in the same area in Koreatown, New Malden before. We did 25 episodes in the first series. Then I went to Korea for a few months, and then other places in Asia, and then finally came back. So it was a nice sort of day out. It was a new place for Tim. He's Canadian anyway, but, you know, so many things in the UK are kind of new to him. Whereas me, I know that place very well. As much as it's changing, like every town and every part of the world, I guess, to some extent. So we had a great time. Spoke about what we've been up to. Obviously, we've had Zoom calls as well, so we were up to speed with some of that stuff. But there was a lot more we had to tell each other. We also took a bus somewhere for a museum that I've been to before, or rather a big house that I've been to. Tim wanted to see the museum part of that place, so that was an adventure, because it was more than just a bus. It was a bus. It was a Solomon Centre. We got a bus, then we had to walk, and it was a great day, beautiful day. It was really warm. Of course, I've come back to the UK to this beautiful weather, mostly beautiful weather. You know, I knew that that was part of the plan, that when I chose to come back a few weeks back, I made the final decision and said, yes, I'm coming back to the UK after 10.5 months away. You know, coming back in the summer was part of the part of the sort of motivation. As I mentioned as well, there is a guest coming up, and that guest is somebody, if you're into Korean literature or Korean poetry or Korean culture in general perhaps, he's very well known. His name is Brother Anthony, but he's also got a Korean name, which is An Sonjae. And if you see our thumbnail for this show, not only is there a lot of alliteration with the letter T, I've also ensured that we've got his Hangul, An Sonjae in Hangul, and he's also known as Brother Anthony of Taizé, a place called Taizé. Now, the reason I'm emphasising that word is because also, this is just me, I'm just silly with wordplay sometimes, but I've put Tim meets Jay, and I put tributes in Trafalgar Square, which I'll come to in a second. Tunbridge Wells, Taizé, translation, and time to talk. So all these T's, I wanted to kind of make it a bit quirky. So I interviewed him I actually visited his office with loads and loads of books. I've met him a few times over the years. He's a really nice guy. He's very knowledgeable in literature. He's been involved with so much Korean literature. I remember him in London doing a speak, because he was in London quite a bit before. When he speaks, it's very sort of not only eloquent, but dramatic. It's very dramatic. If he's reading some literature, he's very good at doing that, sort of enhancing the words or the sentences. And as I say, he translated poetry of Ko-eun, is a famous poet, and other poets. Words, literature, poems for other novelists in Korea. So I've met him several times, but this time when we met, it was actually in Sewol, and we sat down and did a short interview, and I'm very thankful for him for doing that. But he also met myself and Timothy and DIYA. Now, if you don't know DIYA, she's been one of our guests in the first series. That's DIYA on Korea, DIYA Mitra. She's into her literature a lot, and she's into her Korean. She's very, very big on Korea stuff. She's also written for Korea.net. Yeah, so what I was trying to say is, there's been lots of times, weaving in and out of time, that I've actually met up with him. And Tim has as well, other times or the same times, but he's a really fascinating guy. He's also one of the, I would say few, but maybe because I'm saying that because it would have happened before more often, but he's one of the lucky people to be naturalized as a Korean citizen, so that's something. I believe he does touch on that in the interview. But so I wanted to make this episode, although we've posted on social media that his interview is coming up. We didn't say it was the next episode. It's going to be the one after this one, all being well. And we not everyone checks social media. Even social media doesn't even show, the algorithms don't even show everything to everybody. That reminds me of that film, everywhere, everybody, everything to everybody all at once. So I wanted to put it out there because there's people, that listen to podcasts and are not on social media or watch podcasts. We have the video version. And just a reminder, we've recently started up not only these video episodes that we do with loads of other videos that I make and films I make are already on YouTube as under Jason K-Town Verney, which is me, but also there's a Not So Korean podcast own channel. It's only got a few subscribers, but we wanted to put that out there so that mine doesn't get cluttered solely with the podcast, but also perhaps it will go in that direction later on. So that's An Sonjae, Brother Anthony. And the reason I mentioned, I've spoken about Tunbridge Wells and Tim, but the reason I mentioned Taizé, not only for the tea, but also actually talking of the letter T, Brother Anthony is very partial to some tea, but also makgeolli, great Korean food. I actually had a meal with him in Korea. Met him a few times. He actually came to my film screening, my screening of Reparation. I had 2 friends screenings of my film in Seoul, and he was one of the audience members and one of the attendees. I'm very grateful for him coming, and I believe he liked the film. But also, the letter T, I'd mentioned Tunbridge Wells, but also translation. Now, the reason I'm just going to touch on translation is because Tim's work, or some of his work, revolves around translating from Korean to English. And my life, and especially the last 10 years or so, and Tim's life, I'm sure, has revolved around translation, whether that be events that relate to translating Korean, or the events about novels or novelists we've met and their books have been translated. And also my film, just to touch on that again, I had to get it translated because it's in English and Korean, so it's a dual language film. So I had to have, actually one of the actresses did a lot of the translation, and I also got it again for the subtitles, for the Korean subtitles of the English, and I think Korean of the Korean. Yes, it's got dual. If a certain version of my film, my 30-minute film Reparation, It's a drama. It's got the subtitles English and Korean throughout, so you've got it all the time. So no matter what language is being fed to you, you've got the words for it. That is intentional. So there's been a lot of involvement in my life in the last 10 years, translation, and I wanted to just touch on that because I was just thinking about it when I was putting this podcast together. But we've also had interviews in our first series. We spoke to one or two people that touch on translation. Eugene Kim was one of them, translator, and also I've done a couple of speeches in Korea, and they've had interpreters, so it's not what you might call translating, but people do call it translating as well, interpreting. So I just wanted to touch on that before I move on to Trafalgar Square and the tribute, another T. But this particular important event for me, was our monthly Sewol ferry, the SEOUL memorial or demonstration. We've been doing it for 9 years, every month, mostly Trafalgar Square. We have taken it elsewhere, like to Koreatown, New Malden. We're doing it quite a lot there now, or doing it more often than we used to. So we do that, but also we've taken it to Cambridge a few times. And not only that, it meant that one of our other guests, Dami Eniola, from the first series, who I've done some video for before. She's a very, very knowledgeable music expert and previous student of SOAS, and she studied at SNU, Seoul National University, and we now might be collaborating on something film and music wise. And she's also had a radio show, Gugak Sounds, which was pretty popular. But the reason I'm saying that is because she also turned up for the Sewol Ferry Memorial in Trafalgar Square. There's only a few of us there, about a handful max, and it was nice that she came along. We got a load of photos from other. While we're there, we always get interest from people, either Koreans that passing, the ones that aren't too sort of wary or shy, or some of the Koreans that might pass us in Trafalgar Square, might take a picture and walk on, and sort of just a shy sort of thing, shyly. It used to happen, I would say they were more cautious when Park Geun-hye, the president that was in power when this happened, and people would say responsible for this tragedy, her government at least, that people they're more likely to walk up now. So if they see us in Trafalgar Square with our placards in English or Korean, and our loads of ribbons we have and badges, which we don't ask for donations. People can give them if they want, but we don't ask. They come up now more since she got sort of ousted, and the presidency changed. Moon Jae-in was later on, and now there's it's all changing in Korea, often for the better, but often not as well. You could say the same about other countries as well. So it was great to spend some time with Dami. So we had myself and a woman from the memorial who's been there for many years, who's been doing this for quite a few years, the same as me, joined us for our usual. We had basically tea and cake in the crypt, which is St Martin's in the Fields essentially, but it's right near National Portrait Gallery. It was great to see Dami. As I say, we spoke about a few things. We even visited briefly a Hong Kong art exhibition where there was an auction going on of some sort. And then we also, as I say, we spoke about other stuff, and included in that was a potential collaboration, some music from my next film. But it was great to see her. It was great to see Dami. What is left to say? Well, we've got that guest. We've got Brother Anthony, or An Sonjae, coming up. All being well, that's going to be the next episode. That should be episode 34. It was great to see Tim in Tunbridge Wells, but obviously Tunbridge Wells has no connection to Korea, or no major connection to Korea. But the place of New Malden, where we started this podcast, myself and Tim and a few others that we know are going to meet at a certain time of day on the 6th of July. So that will be my first time. I might go there before, but it's unlikely because it's not that long from now. And the reason I was saying, and even it says on our thumbnail, that if there is a chance to, if we're both available, or if either of us are available, if you want to come and say hello, we're happy to meet up, maybe go for a coffee, a chat, maybe just take you somewhere that we might think is a great Korean place, whether that's a cafe, a bingsu place, or whether that is a restaurant or some other sort of Korean related building. There's, we can maybe show you some sites. Obviously this is not a tour, but I know that I'm going to be free for much of that day, not all, but much of that day, and we are meeting, myself, Tim, and a few others, a handful of us basically, are meeting at a certain restaurant in New Malden, as it stands at the moment. So I'm going to go over to New Malden, Koreatown, sometime in the morning or early afternoon on that day. So I will essentially, my plan is to be in that area for the whole day. So this is why I'm putting it out there that anyone who lives London or outside of London and wants to, you can get in touch on my Instagram, or our Not So Korean podcast Instagram, or the community on Facebook, or even my personal Instagram is Jasian Verney. So it's J, then it's Asian, then it's Verney, so Verney. So some people say Jasian, but it's Jasian, so it's meant to sound like Asian. So Jasian Verney, that is it. Or just look up Jason Verney, maybe that'll be easier. But no worries, if not, there'll be lots of things for me to do. I'm going to go and meet the people at the Kingston Environment Centre who are in New Malden. I used to see them every Saturday and sometimes more. They have had events or links to Korean related events. In fact, Glastonbury is happening at the moment. I've been there 6 times, and one of those years there was 4 Korean artists there. I was doing my best to see them all, and I did see them all. I met a few of them. I met Jambinai, who I've met a few times since. Goneche, she's one of my favourite singer-songwriters. She's from Gwangju, but she performs a lot in various places in South Korea, and she's been to London a few times. But what I was going to say was, there's been a few years where they've had Korean bands and returning ones, like Goneche, she returned. I'm just looking on here, the artist ADG7, and they've just recently performed at Glastonbury, which you can find on BBC iPlayer, their performance, ADG7, and they're kind of one of these fusion 9-piece, they're a 9-piece Korean traditional music band. But the reason I mention them now to do with New Malden is, I believe I've heard that they're in the Greenfields area. They were in the Greenfields area, and because it's the Kingston Environment Centre, there's a couple of people that run that have been involved with Glastonbury and that particular area, because Glastonbury is huge. You've got, they say there's 150 stages now, including little musician corners and small areas or lesser known stages. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if there's that many, but basically it's a massive place. But you've got these ethical fields which are all about recycling, all about the environment, the climate change. So green fields kind of falls into that category. So that's why I was touching on that from New Malden. Well, I've pretty much covered what I wanted to cover. So I hope you tune in for that episode, that interview with the very, very knowledgeable brother Anthony, also known as An Sonjae. And you'll also, if you are in New Malden, Koreatown, on the 6th of July, do let us know beforehand if you know. And and if you ever want to take part in our Sewol ferry monthly memorials, just for a start, we've got a Facebook group. We're on Facebook. I think it's Remembering Sewol UK, and on Instagram it's Sewol @Reunite_UK. You know, everyone's welcome. We've been doing this for a long time. The 10th year anniversary next year. If you missed other episodes, I actually went to the ferry yet again in Mokpo towards the end of, or the latter half of 2022 during my time in Korea. Saw the ship, quite emotional, quite sort of, you know, I mean, for me, I've got this strong connection with it, and it's unexplainable. The ship this time is turned upright, and also I visited the classroom where the students is kind of I wouldn't say entirely a replica of the classroom. It's the actual pieces of the classroom made to form the same thing in another building near Ansan, in the Ansan area, which is where the students who were on that ferry, 250 of them tragically were drowned because they were told to stay put, they would be rescued. And there was also adults, teachers, and others that lost their lives. So not to end this on too much of a downbeat in a downbeat mood, but if you do want to, you just have to get in touch with me, or just look online. These are open to everybody. Anyone can come and stand. We just stand for an hour and a half. It's not silent like it used to be silent. We would have a laugh, we'd chat, and it used to be called stay put because we were literally staying put for that couple of hours. It used to be 2 hours, and the students were also told at the time in the ferry to stay put. So yeah, we've got loads more interviews to come as well, and I will just see you in the next episode. Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. So that's all from us. 안녕히 계세요.